All right. Good morning, everybody. Should be live. Give it a few moments. If you're watching this on replay, this should just be like a half-hour show or stuff or something along those lines. Since F1 does start in an hour, I'm sure people will have questions about that, and I kind of want to watch that. Right now. Let me mute that so we're not echoing like crazy. All right, as I've been stating and talking about heavily in the last two videos this weekend, uh, literally can't sell literally the best. I mean, honestly, the best deal in probably DFS right now. Basically, three whole websites for the price of $320 a month. You get us, you get all of our projections, all the tools we have, not only the NASCAR tools, but you get all of the pay dirt tools as well, since we are partnered with pay dirt analytics, and then you also get SaberSim Ultimate, which includes their entire array of contest sims, building 5,000 lineups, and so on and so forth. Use promo code Masters T DFS for 33% off any of these monthly packages here if you have not already joined, or if you have SaberSim and would like to use our stuff. I would heavily advise you just getting SaberSim through us, so you have more tools than just the regular SaberSim that you get through them. Anyway, now I did, unfortunately, however, for the case of looking at Kyle Larson and Bowman, I don't know if it's that huge. I did miss the first couple laps of group number one. Obviously, I was dealing with my AC being repaired. But really, I think, at least today, now statistically, this has been my worst racetrack to build for. I'm telling you exactly where I'm going today. If you want to do it, whatever, this is how I'm looking at it. We can look at this in two different ways. Now, yet again, one of the tools that we have available is the Cup dashboard. Not only do we have the lap analyzer that we talked about heavily yesterday, how you can use that. Today, looking more so at the dashboard that we have to look at here. And yet again, we're gonna zoom in slightly here just so you guys can see it. If you have any issues or want to see any of these other tabs, we might go ahead and look at DK scoring ranges, possibly place differential, but for the most part, this is just what we're going to be looking at today on screen. Like I said, if you want to look at any of this, consider joining any of these memberships. When we look at who has led laps, now yet again, the races that we're looking at for the Dominator analysis are the last four um, races at Martinsville and the last four races at Bristol. Okay, so when we're looking at these races here, who are the drivers that we are seeing show speed and show consistent runs? Also, on top of that, looking at the last four races for Bristol Motor Speedway, and usually I sort these by just top 10 finishes, but specifically since we're looking at track data for Bristol, which I don't normally do typically at other intermediates or other short tracks, I'll look at other things. For Bristol specifically, just due to the nature of the program that we have today, not this program, but obviously the race. I'm sorting by average finish of the last four races here. And so not only are we looking at who has had the best average finish the last 2 years, or at least the last four races that they ran here, we're also looking at who has led laps in these races. Now, if we go ahead and put Bristol on top, which yet again, I still think looking at Martinsville, just from a contest perspective, makes a lot of sense. Obviously, these are the two racetracks a year to where we have 500 laps in these races. Obviously, the spring race of Martinsville is 400, but still looking at this from a what is represented in the contests and how people are performing is very, very, very important. Now, when we're looking at who has been leading laps, we can approach this data from a multitude of angles. We can, and good morning, Andy. We can look at this by the amount of laps that people have led in these races. We can look at the distribution of fast laps in the highest, and yet again, these are just the highest scoring lap leaders in this race, or not lap leaders, but highest scoring DraftKings points uh, in these races. We can also look at the drivers who have been involved in these. If we're just looking at Bristol, what are the names, or who are the names that are popping out here? It is Kyle Larson, who has led a decent amount of laps. Now, granted, this 20 and 64 fast laps isn't, great, but he did also start dead last in this race. So we have Larson three times. Okay, so three out of the 1, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. 3 of the last 11 races have had Larson lead in here. We've also had Denny Hamlin, who has started second and third in these individual races here, lead a good portion of the laps, and then Christopher Bell. Okay, yet again, another asterisk that we have around today is the race today is very similar, if not slightly colder, and certainly the practice was way colder yesterday compared to where the race was last year. Okay, the track is not taking grip. Tire wear is going to be a huge thing here. Now, I don't know if it's going to be as drastic as the spring race last year, where you had guys literally off pace and you know just tons of guys pitting lap after lap for tire failures and stuff like that. But it is going to be very much a tire or a conserving tire heavy race. Okay. We typically lean towards drivers who are experienced in the field in order to do that, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a very high likelihood that we do have people slip into the lead either due to pit strategy or just due to people run into issues and stuff who have not led or who are not on the screen. But then again, that's why I'm looking at another statistic here of what have the average finishes been in these races. We can look back at this at the spring race last year. You had a situation where Kaz Grala and Justin Haley performed exceptionally well just because they were basically so slow they couldn't lose or they weren't burning up their tires. We only had 5 guys finish on the lead lap in this situation. But still, who were the people up top in this race? It was Hamlin, it was Bowman, or Hamlin, Truex, who isn't here, Keselowski, Bowman, Larson. Okay, obviously Nemechek comes from the back of the field, but combine that with what happened specifically last year in a very similar race. Yet again, I don't think it'll be that uh, aggressive in terms of tire wear to where we're only going to have 5 guys on the lead lap. I mean, this was literally. I hate using the word unprecedented because I feel like people throw that around a lot, but the amount of um, calamity that happened in this race last year, I don't think it'll be that aggressive. People understand they're going in knowing that we have to save tires, but we're looking at how people performed in that race specifically. We're then looking at how people have done in the last 4 Bristol races. For me, and when we're looking at this grid, and then you compare that with where people are at in the practice time. So obviously Larson is the fastest car in practice, at least for the laps I'm looking at here. Now, which was really odd is that even I believe it was Custer it's Custer who did 47 laps. Typically there's just there's just people who do way more laps in practice. I was honestly shocked looking back at the fact that we just have 47 um, laps led and stuff. What we can do, and not lastly, but we'll go ahead and look back at last year's race specifically and look at where, yet again, this is a way that you could use the NASCAR lap analyzer, just one of the tools that we have here. When it loads, this race was the 2024 Food City. So we're looking at 2024, and you can do this for any of the series as long as NASCAR's data is correct. So we can go ahead and look at this race here, make sure that pulls correctly. And if we look at running position between these favorite guys here, so obviously we have Larson that we're looking at. We have Denny Hamlin that we're looking at today. As I think last year is a pretty good representation of where people are going to be at. Now, yet again, we had tons of, not I was going to say tons of traffic, tons of just variance in terms of the fall off of the race, because last year, as I said, it was so cold the track literally wasn't taking rubber at all. We saw a very similar situation in practice, and similar in a situation of, hey, teams are now expecting the track to not take rubber. They're not going to run nearly as hard last year. But you look at where these drivers were last year, and granted, you can see that Bowman gained a lot of positions in these yellow flag conditions here. So you might say that that's a bit concerning. And then obviously we had tons of fall off last year. I think just showing what Haley did and what Kazgrala did is a good representation of kind of how slow these guys were, but late in the race when everybody else was having tire issues, that's really getting through the field. You might be like, wow, you're looking at a lot on screen here. It might be a lot. Well, you can, easily move people down. Anyway, the reason I'm looking at these guys specifically is when I'm looking at the race today and we're looking at the grid and where people are at, we have obviously Larson is the fastest in practice. We have Bowman, who is ninth fastest on overall times. We have Hamlin, who is 14th. But and yet again, I'm only looking at laps over 113 miles an hour, I do believe. When we're looking at where these guys are at here, with having three of the top four starters here, your two favorites to lead today, Larson and Hamlin, starting third and fourth, with Alex Bowman at $8,000 right here, due to the fact that this race is going to go. I'm going to use green because I don't think we're going to have a ton of like true carnage today. I think we're going to see guys spread out. I think this race is probably going to run pretty decently. Green, however, with that said, I guess we could look back at the last four races here and just see the amount of yellows and what the average guys in the lead lap is very quickly. And we look at percent race ran under yellow. 16% here. We look back at the 2023 race, 10%. We look back at the spring race last year, which had, all the yellows and stuff due to people blowing out tires and stuff. And you got to remember that NASCAR just stopped throwing yellows at the end of the race or towards, really the second half, and people realized that people weren't, or not weren't, but seeing that it was a tire issue and stuff. So I don't think we're going to see nearly, 19% under yellow. I think it's going to be much closer to this, 7.2, 10 or so, and 10 or so on this one that we have just seen in the fall race and stuff. And so when we look at that here, we're seeing 10 guys on the lead lap. We're seeing 12, obviously the 5 from the spring race last year, and then we're seeing 10 again. Okay. So I'm much more inclined, yet again, when we look at who's finishing well in these races, Larson, Elliott, Hamlin, Bell, Bowman. Um, and the reason I'm focused on these guys here is because I think they're probably the favorites to finish up front today. Obviously, the spring race last year, fall race in 2023, Denny Hamlin, Larson, Bell, Chase Elliott again, and so on and so forth. And the night race in 2022. Wait a minute. Why do I not have Larson's 2020? Oh, it's because they still ran dirt. I was like, why am I missing a Bristol race here? Looking at the grid, Bowman, Larson, Hamlin, Bell, those guys should be the projected favorites to win this race, lead laps, so on and so forth. Due to the fact that we have 500 laps, we have to focus on the lap leaders. Like, that is the main avenue of success here. And yet again, if you want to look at this or really anything, also if you're playing, MLB after this, because I know Adam and I believe Rody are going to be doing a show as well. If you want to use the Pater tools, if you want to use SaberSim, if you want to use our projections and stuff are here, yet again, do consider getting the best value currently right now in DFS. As I stated, pretty much 3 websites in one under this price tag. When we're looking at, these scoring ranges for these events, I mean, we are going to have some that's just actually that's just the main lap leaders and stuff. When we're looking at the actual scoring ranges for this race, okay, obviously nailing the primary lap leaders and fast lap getters is important. Now, I would much rather take as many darts as possible and land on one guy, even if he just runs away with the race, than chase place differential, then give up, lead lap finish equity and so on and so forth. So I don't really have a ton of exposure to Logano statistically, just looking back at his last 4 races here. Now, a lot of this has been troubles in the playoffs for him. Let me make sure I'm not X'd out here. But yet again, looking back at the last, average finish here, you're going to notice that Logano has been absolutely horrendous at this racetrack. And yet again, he's ran into a lot of issues. He's been in a lot of situations in the playoffs to where he's had to have a good race here, and just stuff has happened that way. Okay, but even when he's running at the end of the races last year, very, very poor, finishes. We look back at the 05, yet again, this is why I like this tool, because not only can you just, obviously everybody can see, a very easy way to see where people finish. If you're using race and reference, but you can go and look at and see what did Logano do specifically in the spring race to have such a poor day. Okay, obviously had a tire go down or some situation here in the green, got trap lap down, and then obviously yellow came out, and then his day was done. But even still, I mean, never. I mean, sure, cracking inside the top five and stuff, but you got to remember a lot of people were having tire wear issues and stuff. We look back at the. Let's go here. If we look back at the night race, I'm pretty sure I had the food one last time. We look back at the fall race for Logano, and this is a prime example of just how poor he was running. Now, I'm pretty sure he speeds on pit lane at this point. Yet again, right inside the top 10 or top 15 and, teetering on 10th and 11th right now. Has an issue on pit lane and then gets lapped and is just not able to do anything. We're seeing that even if you have a good car, now, yet again, this is maybe just using this stuff, but we've seen time and time again at Bristol, even if you have a good car, when you start in the back of the field on a restart, you're already half a lap down on the leader. Okay, it's very very difficult to not get lapped in a situation like this. So one, we have to pray that guys don't blow tires. Two, we have to pray that they don't have an issue on pit lane to start in the back of the field. But when we're looking at this grid and we see Logano, we see people like Chastain, we see people like when William Byron and Tyler Reddick both messed up in their Q qualifying laps and stuff. And then also Logano crash, but like not an issue. He's repairing that obviously. But I have very little faith that all these guys in the back of the field, the big names in the back of the field, actually finish on the lead lap. I think that's going to be a very, very difficult thing to do with the expected speed that Larson, Hamlin, Bell, and Bowman have. I just think they end up getting lapped and trapped a lap down. Especially combine that with, so not only do we worry about guys who are slow getting lapped, we then look at people who are starting way higher up than they should be, specifically, and a real expectation or a real chance that they slow whatever lane they're trapped in down just on the initial restarts. Like Ty Dillon starting 12th, he's not going to finish there, right? Regardless of where he finishes, he's going to be slowing down whatever lane he's going to be in. He's going to be moving chicane for the initial, runs and stuff. We can say the same thing about Jesse Love. We can say potentially the same thing about Michael McDowell and stuff like that. When we're looking at people who have statistically finished pretty poorly at this track, well, I guess McDowell isn't one of those. Let me look at this grid again, so I'm not just bouncing back and forth. Stenhouse, obviously starting second. I'm not playing Stenhouse. If you want to play a guy who has not been very well recently and at this track, both situations can be true. Like I'm just not playing Stenhouse, right? So that's removing him from the field. That's a guy who's gonna drop, through the field at some point, slow the field down or whatever. We keep looking through and see other people who are starting up front who have ran well. Now I mentioned, Justin Haley and the Rick Ware cars last year finishing 17th and stuff, and he has finished 12th in the Colleague 31 car. But that was all the way back in 2022. I would lean much more to Haley probably finishing around 18th or so today. So yet again, that's another guy who is, expected to kind of slow the field down or whatever. You have Austin Dillon as well. You have, primarily like when I'm looking at Bristol, and if you have a history of kind of being slow and just not, performing decently well, I just have to project you to not finish on the lead lap and to not, have a good day and stuff. And so I really, really think this hinders all the big place differential names in the back of the field. If I had to chase one of the big boys in the back of the field, between Byron Reddick, Logano, so on and so forth, it's probably Chastain. When we look at him specifically, just really fast going through, and yet again, even like his practice speeds aren't. I don't know, they are bad. I don't know who I was thinking of really fast. It's unfortunate to be that slow, but when we're looking at what Chastain has been able to do, now he has come through the field, and again, this was in spring race last year, but I would argue that he probably has the better chance, but even still, looking at his practice times, there's a real chance that you could trap a lap down and stuff. And so, this is a very, very long-winded way to say I think we're gonna have about anywhere from 12 to 9 guys on lead lap at the end of the race. If we just have to focus on the lap leaders, right? Because of that, we have an $8,000 Alex Bowman starting on the pole. Okay, now we saw him start on the pole at Martinsville a couple weeks ago, and I believe he only led like 34 laps or so like that. I could be wrong. Let me take a quick gander. Um, he led 43 and had 16 fast laps. Just due to his pricing, where the builds are going. Also, I would absolutely at least have a 5K punt, if not two, because we're trying to pay up for guys who are getting fast laps and laps led and stuff. Um, Due to where pricing kind of falls in line, I think it would be advised, especially if we're chasing Larson and Hamlin, potentially even Bell. Okay, now it's going to be hard to make a 310K workout, but if you're at least what I'm doing is I'm primarily focusing on Larson and Hamlin. I really, really like Bowman from a build perspective to easily fit in there. That AK isn't awkward. It doesn't, jeopardize what the um, lineups are going with. We're already expecting to really punt at the bottom of the 5K range anyway, and so I just really like Bowman, Larson, and Hamlin today. Now yet again, this has been it's been the worst fucking track for me. So like I'm just expecting to just piss that money away at something with like Larson blowing a motor or something. Um, but that's where I'm going. Now, say you like Larson, you don't like Hamlin, whatever, and you want to use Larson Bell, or whatever. I just think Bowman at $8,000 makes a lot of sense from a build perspective because he already has starting position on the field. He is not going to be one of the first people lap down, and as long as I'm trying to focus on drivers who are at least going to be, as I said, expected to finish on the lead lap, which is really around like 13 cars, and statistically, who has been able to do that? We've been looking at. Um, these finishes here. I mean, these are the drivers who are, expected to kind of be in that range. Bowman is right on the edge of that. Him right on the edge of expected to finish on the lead lap, starting first. I can very easily fit him with the best guys here. I also haven't mentioned Elliott as well, but Elliott is another guy who, like, I just think you have to. Now, yet again, he's a harder sell because he's starting 20th, and so he'd be a much later uh, racer. But I'm pretty sure he started in the back of the field. Well, his average start is 11th. Let's take a quick look really fast. 2022 started 23rd, finished second. Outside of these, had top 10 starting positions. So this is a situation where we really haven't seen this in like 3 years of him starting 20th. But I I would just try and focus on getting as many lap leaders as possible, and those expected guys are probably Bowman, Larson, Hamlin, Bell, and Elliott. I think that's why just Bowman fits into so many um, lineups. Past that, I'm kind of just defaulting to what my projections and builds are showing. Yet again, similar to yesterday, and not because it happened or didn't happen. That's not what that sentence means. I'm just saying similar to yesterday of trying to nail whoever the lap leader is now. Just so happen to be Larson lapping the fucking field, but that's what I'm focused on. I'm not focused on the middle of the lineup. I don't really care who I'm playing. If it's given me now, I'm probably not playing Josh Bilicki in the 60s in the 66 car, but at short tracks, the optimal lineup is typically having a punt play because you're just trying to fit in all your lap leaders, especially if we have situation to where, and we look at the distribution of points here. If you have, the three guys scoring over 75 points, it doesn't matter what else you're doing. If you need to pivot, if you need to pay down at the salary to fit those guys in, that's what we're doing, or that's what you have to do. So that's kind of where I'm at. Yet again, I kind of want to make this video, around half an hour or so because obviously we have F1, MLB and whatever. But if you guys have any questions specifically, we can look at that. We can also look at F1 because that starts in 35 minutes. If you guys do care about that, if not, I'll probably be here for another 5 minutes and then I will skedaddle. Yet again, I'll just leave this up on the screen while I look through. Cool questions. Yet again, promo code MASTER TDFS for 33% off any of the monthly package here. Let's see. What's going on? What's going on, Adam? Uh, let's see. Miami right now, you're fading Elliott to get overweight on Larson Hamlin. I mean, that's what I'm doing. Um, so that's what I'm doing. That's what my stuff is showing me to do. That's mainly it. Let's see what else is going on. I don't think we have much. I guess talking F1 really fast because nobody's here. I have not built my F1 stuff yet. I'll probably do that in the next 15. But just looking at the starting grid really fast. Um, Now McLaren is drastically faster than the rest of the field. I don't see Verstappen now. Sabers actually, we can just kind of show that. Now this is not who I'm going with. I was just messing with lineups and stuff yet again because you have through us you have access to Sabers and Multiple and stuff. These aren't lineups that I'm building, but looking through different builds. Now, the one thing I did do was bump up. Now, yet again, this is now contest sims to give you projections, whatever the case may be. I think that's very important for F1. I did manually bump up Mercedes, mainly because there's a real chance that Russell and Antonelli potentially finish in front of Norris. Um, So statistically, or not statistically, but you would have it's probably better to have a much higher Mercedes projection than just the 28. Because realistically, as we've talked about at numerous occasions, McLaren with Oscar winning and potentially, obviously, if they get two guys in the top three, it's a huge. But it's probably going to be Oscar winning with Norris fighting for third with a potential Mercedes in front of him. Um, So it's much more, at least from a build perspective, it makes much more sense to probably have exposure to Mercedes, especially with the 15 expected ownership. I think they probably come in around like 18 and stuff because everybody's going to be slamming in McLaren. Obviously, we need the race winner, but this is a really tough slate because kind of similar to last week. Um, Hajar is, being pushed in the captain. And obviously, if things go green, like they did, like there was no variance last weekend. Like nothing changed at all in last weekend's race. Um, and typically, I'm not building for that. Okay. Yet again, at Bahrain, where these guys have done all their preseason testing and stuff, where everybody's familiar with kind of where they're going to run and stuff. There's a high likelihood of that happening again, and then we end up having a situation where like your captains are Hajar. I mean, possibly Esteban. I mean, we're obviously punting and stuff, but regardless of where you're going up here, we're getting very similar ownership to the drivers. Like if we're doing Isaac, right? You know, kind of similar builds. And right now they're just sorted. That's ROI. Let's sort this bitch by projected. So like pretty similar builds. We look at It's so interesting. It's more Oliver than Esteban. Well, Esteban wrecked and stuff. I guess Esteban has a pit lane start, right? I would assume. This has the grid penalty for Russell White. Yeah. Okay. So the grid penalties have been in. Sorry, man. I'm just kind of here sitting. Give me a second here. Looking through. Like I said, I haven't built anything yet. But between Oliver, I think we've ran. I mean, I had played Stroll the last couple weeks. It's very, very, very unlikely that Fernando was going to keep DNFing and stuff. Now he didn't last weekend, but the other races, like that's very like Alonso isk. So I just don't think Stroll is being used. So like, I mean, it's these guys as your main captains. Like this is just not a fun slate because you're being forced to play probably McLaren. one of the 3 guys, and then there's very similar builds and stuff. And so if it goes green like it did last weekend, I think we're gonna see a lot of duplication. I would advise to potentially just try and get different and play people um, who just aren't being played. I don't know. Not a huge fan of this F1 slate just because we're kind of being pinched in a box here with McLaren at 14,000, because they've been at 13.5 and stuff. Like, that's not as constrictive, but the 14 really starts making things hard to really, get different unless people, wreck out or whatever. And you can't, obviously, if we start going through people who have issues and stuff, not Oscar. Lando is like one of the main guys to run the issue since he's so much faster than people. He has a high likelihood of being involved in a lap one incident. But if he's involved in lap one incident, the McLaren isn't going to work anyway. So it's very, very difficult to get different with Oscar as the race winner and McLaren here, because then that still requires Norris to do well. So you then either end up using, Russell or freaking Leclerc, and then like we're still building. Like, I just think we're gonna have a lot of duplications today in this F1 race. But that's kind of where we're at here. Let's see. Any more questions? Why kill time? Can you play 3 dominators? That is basically what we're doing. That is what I'm expecting if I'm playing. I mean, ideally, you want to, going back to this type of stuff. So yet again, when we're looking at the distribution of the DK scoring ranges, without which I would heavily implore people, use these tools to help you out to see how contests are actually being scored. Specifically, when we're looking at the amount of dominator points you are needing in the top in the top 10, 15 DraftKings points rankings, it is drastically important that you nail the lap leaders and people who can get fast laps. Like, at a track that has 500 laps, that is absolutely the most important thing. Yet again, when we look at here specifically, and this is combining both Bristol and Martinsville because they have the 500 laps, it is absolutely important that we end up getting these guys here. Yet again, if you can't see this or whatever, get the package or whatever. I don't know how else to help you. When we look at the analysis of where these guys are at, and you look at their finish ranges and stuff, like, it's most likely that they're going to finish up front, outside of running the main issues and stuff. But you look at the laps led by finishing position. You look at the fast laps by finishing position. Now, it is 500 laps, and you're going to have guys on different strategies and in different packages, or not different packages, but in different traffic situations. But I mean, you can't realistically, unless you're just putting like wildly crazy, like unless you are playing AJ and stuff. Yet again, I fucking hate using the word dominator because people are like, how many dominators do you want? So on and so forth. Like, you want to try and have the leader at every point in the race. I don't care if that takes you 3 drivers in your lineup. I don't care if that turns into 4. If AJ Allmendinger takes the lead at some point in this race, you want as many lap leaders in your lineups as possible. So build with that. Don't build for place differential. Build with people finish on lead lap, and so on and so forth. No pit lane start for Ocon. Okay, cool. Then I don't know why Saber Sim, yet again, I don't build things, or I haven't built anything yet. But I don't know why they have him projected worse than Oliver here. Like, that doesn't make a ton of sense. Especially outside of him finishing 18th last weekend, he's been better than Behrman. Like, it's not like they're starting up front either. That's just so interesting. Anyway, 25 minutes before the F1 race starts. I think we talked, or at least I've talked about everything I wanted to for the Cup Series race. If you guys have any more questions or anything, obviously you can ask me in Discord, and so on and so forth, and I'll help you there. Yet again, all the NASCAR videos and stuff, which I already help people anyway, in Discord if people ask me for one-on-one stuff anyway. But we're at the very end of upgrading the current website to new, like leaving WordPress and getting on a new provider and stuff. Once all that is done, all the NASCAR videos and stuff will be going behind the paywall in their entirety. So if you like what you're seeing, if you want to use any of these tools, and or if you want to use any of the various tools that we have here, the PayDirt analytics tools that James has built that he uses, any of the projections that she chooses because he is winning like a madman, or anything regarding us or SaberSim, like I would heavily advise you to consider joining us, as I know several people already have and are currently waiting for other subscriptions to end so they can join us. I do believe that is it. Any other thing, last minute things? Betting NASCAR first time. Ay. You're picking a rough track to do that at. Also, I don't bet. I'm in Texas, so I can't. So I never even look at sports books. I'm very like anti sports betting, not like ban it and stuff. I just personally don't do it. I think it's a losing game. And because obviously getting limited and so on and so forth. I absolutely prefer DFS over anything like that, even pickup sites and stuff like that. So that's my opinion. So I would be very hesitant on listening to me on any betting advice, just because I don't do it. Yeah. Anyway, past that, thank you guys very much for listening. I will talk to you guys later. Bye bye.